Hi everyone, welcome back. We're hitting it up today with reviewing Unit 1, Topic 3 in AP Comparative Government and Politics. These are the core characteristics of democratic and authoritarian regimes. So let's get started. Before I forget, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Myself or someone in our community will get back to you with that question, or if I made a mistake or clarification, let me know. And we'll also be following the College Board CED course and exam description. That is linked in the video description below. All right, now we can get started. In the previous video, you saw this exact same slide, and this is just to review the fact that we are talking about this middle part of our institution pyramids, regimes. Regimes are more stable and they have an ideological, enduring framework. Governments come and go, and states are very solid as well. Right? But we're talking about regimes, and in this course, there are only two: democratic regimes and authoritarian regimes. When political scientists are trying to determine, well, how do we categorize this, democratic or authoritarian, they really examine a couple of different things. How much does a country follow the rule of law? How much does a country or the government control or influence the media or the free press? To what degree is there government transparency? To what degree are the people aware of what's going on in the government? To what degree are there free and fair elections? Free elections means almost all citizens can and have the ability to do so to vote. And fair elections, do they allow independent media coverage? Does that government allow different political parties to form, mainly an opposition to form? And then finally, how much can citizens participate in the government and the ways in which they're able to do so? In all of these cases, in authoritarian regimes, there is a less degree of following the rule of law. They actually tend to follow a policy called rule by law. There is more control over the media. There is less government transparency. There may be elections, but are they really free and are they fair? And there is limited access to how citizens can effectively participate in the government. With authoritarian regimes, there are several subtypes that you do need to know. So let's just review those. The first one is an illiberal democracy, or also sometimes called a hybrid or a flawed regime. This is where it's kind of at that transition point of, is it a democracy or is it an authoritarian regime? And it's when a state limits or doesn't protect civil liberties and civil rights. It often infringes upon those things. So while they do have regular, mostly free and fair elections, but they often have limited political competition. There might be a political party that dominates. We often call that an illiberal democracy, which for our purposes, we're going to classify as an authoritarian regime. For example, that would be Russia today. The Waples textbook also has another subtype that is not mentioned by the College Board that is an authoritarian regime. So you may come across this, and that would be electoral. That's when the ruling party controls the government and there's limited access to independent media. Other parties have limited success in actually winning seats and having an effective participation in the government. Russia is also could be classified as that. So the Waples textbook actually does mention electoral. For our purposes, if you just know that it is an illiberal democracy, Russia, for that matter, is an illiberal democracy, you're fine. The other one that also was formerly Russia was a totalitarian government. That's when the government seeks to have full control over its population in every aspect of their life. So if we're just limiting to the AP6, Russia or the USSR under Joseph Stalin was a totalitarian, authoritarian regime. It was also a one-party authoritarian regime. The best example of a one-party authoritarian regime would be, of course, China. One-party states is when that one particular party, in this case in China, it is the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, they always control the levers of power, of government. Other parties may exist, and they do in China actually, but they exist at the will of the Communist Party, and those other parties will never have controlling power. And I also mentioned Russia under the USSR could also be classified as a one-party state. The final two are theocracies and military regimes. Theocracies are when the political leaders are required to follow a particular religion, or all those political leaders are led by religious leaders of a specified religion. Iran is our theocratic authoritarian state. Oh gosh, these words are long ones to stumble over. And finally, we have military. That's when the military controls the government. Nigeria, in its various reiterations of their first, second, third republic, and they were under military authoritarian regimes. So this is an interesting graphic to describe what I was talking about exactly where illiberal democracy falls, right? It is a spectrum. It's not a binary thing. So we could rank each country on that state. But China is really considered to be the most authoritarian state, followed by Iran, then Russia as an illiberal democracy. Nigeria and then Mexico are both democracies, but they've had struggles, so they are what we call democratizing, which is what the next video is all about. And then finally, we have the UK, which we would classify as a liberal democracy. They protect civil liberties and civil rights, freedom of the press, and so forth. In fact, indicators of democracies or liberal democracies are elections. The people accept the election results regardless of which political party wins. That's a really big hallmark. Multiple political parties do exist. There's government transparency. There's often checks or limitations within government to protect the abuse of power. And finally, there's also the rule of law. That's the concept that government officials are held to the same standards or law or rules as regular people. So if a government official were to get a speeding ticket, right, well, they're going to be held to the same standard as if I or a regular person was to get a speeding ticket. Checks and balances, or having limitations within government and having three branches of government, also supports and protects liberal democracies or democracies in general. Having the division of power and greater independence between the different branches increases accountability and therefore limits corruption and increases transparency and ensures the survival of the democracy. Finally, we have indicators of authoritarianism. This is when you have the government officially control the media through official media sponsorships, like in China, the main Chinese outlet, CGTV, is what you might find on YouTube. That is an operation of the government, of the state. Power is often limited to a few key individuals within that government. They exercise what's called rule by law as opposed to rule of law. Rule by law is when the law is arbitrarily applied. Government officials are not necessarily subject to the same rules or penalties as regular people, or regular citizens are also given overwhelming penalties for a merely minor thing. It's a mechanism for power or control. They also might have an extensive domestic surveillance or spy or informant network to watch over their citizens and to report on those who are not loyal enough to the state, or who to alert them as opposed in regards to potential uprisings. There's a lack of protecting civil liberties and civil rights. And there's another term that you may not have heard of, and that would be cooptation. Cooptation is when some citizens are giving benefits or jobs because of loyalty to the state or to increase their loyalty to the state. And there's often in authoritarian states, there is a higher CPI score than democratic states. All right, so that's it for me today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. See you in the next video.